review. I'm going to talk about something that I found just lately. I think it's a gem. Uh, the writer is the author is Dr. Joseph Etzion, or in Hebrew, Yosef Etzion. And I met him when I worked like 15 years ago in Israel on a project. He was, I think it was in his 80s back then. Uh, and he ran loops around us, young engineers. He is, I wonder if he's still around. He is one of the brightest persons I've ever met. And we worked with him on projects involving target tracking, uh, where I actually learned how to uh, engineer a solid target tracker. Right. So this paper is titled. It's actually a chapter, I think, from a book and that he published, and he wrote this chapter: steady state time constant of the Kalman filter. Let me start with the abstract. Okay? Under the conditions of constant sampling rate and constant sampling errors, after a sufficiently long tracking times, meaning what we call in dynamic systems or control theory steady state, all terms of the covariance matrix converge to their corresponding asymptotic magnitudes. After convergence, all variables of the Riccati equations remain unchanged. In such conditions, the only unknown in this equation is the steady state covariance matrix. An analytic solution of the resulting steady state Riccati equation for short sampling time is derived. After solution, all terms of the resulting covariance matrix are then expressed as functions of a particularly defined time constant. The application of the time constant produces several practical advantages. It greatly facilitates the determination of the model noise parameter, Q, provides a fair assessment of the tracking accuracies, and determines the steady state transfer function of the filter. So basically, what he says is that in steady state, the Kalman filter in steady state under the assumption that specifically uh, the matrices QR and the Kalman gain remain completely deterministic and constant, and then we reach the steady state, and then we can design some sort of a or derive some sort of a time constant that is controlling the behavior of this steady state filter or steady state transfer function. Okay, and he goes on and elaborate the steady state solution of the first order filter. And you see here he uses it for the Q constant. This is actually the Singer model, right? The well-known Singer model for target tracking of maneuvering targets. And he's deriving this Q is actually the Singer model as stated here, and he's stating what is the Q. The tau m is the tau m that these are two parameters that are vague. Okay, tau m is the time constant of the maneuver. Uh, if I recall from the Singer paper, let's see here. Yes, it's the Q. Yep, and he writes what we all know from Kalman filter theory, or Kalman filter in practice, should I say. As a result of this uncertainty, the Q parameter is being routinely determined empirically by way of extensive simulation or field experimentations, and that's true. The matrix Q is quote unquote voodoo in our field, right? And he goes on and derived the P matrix or the P components in the matrix, as well as the Kalman gain for first order and second order filters, like constant velocity, constant acceleration type filters or dynamics. And here he defines the time constant, the time constant, and he ties it to the target maneuvering index, which is defined in Yaakov Bar Shalom book about tracking, and he actually lists the equation in which it's defined. So he ties it to this maneuver constant. Then he goes on and say what's the dynamic response of the first order filter. He lists the difference equations, and he takes t to zero, which means that we're now dealing with a pseudo analog system in which we can describe in the Laplace domain. And he described this system in the Laplace domain and derived the Laplace transfer functions for the velocity and for the position. From it, he also derived the differential equations, and he shows the differential equations uh, solutions. And then he argue that if we take a step input, a unit step input, the step response will be as follows. And he starts simulating stuff. And here you can see that the analytic solution for the position, for example, and the sequential solutions are very, very similar. Okay, so he uh, argues now that the matrix Q can be degenerated into this form: zeros everywhere except for um, one sample time t in the right bottom of the matrix times the Q. Okay, and he is stating something very strong here. This sort of test of the filter's performance clearly shows that the high sophistication of the popular Singer model is actually an illusion, meaningless in its practical applications. Yeah, that's a very strong claim. And then he does the same for second order filter, meaning constant acceleration type dynamics. And he is also simulating stuff here. He shows the degenerator or degraded matrix Q, and that's it. I strongly recommend this as reading, and I'm definitely going to dive into this and maybe publish some sort of a follow up in the Circuit of Knowledge section on my website, in which we can actually uh, basically implement this paper and see the simulations in real life. Uh, that's it. So thank you for listening. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And 1 second, let me stop the sharing. Okay, and these images, these beautiful pictures, my wife paints them. So go to her website and buy yourself for your office some nice paintings. And until then, uh, I'll see you all in the tall grass. Regev out.